Okay, so quadratic functions can be given in multiple forms. One, turning point. In turning point form, our equation can look something like this. F of x is equal to a x plus or minus p squared plus or minus q. A still defines if our graph is looking like this or like that. If A is negative, our graph will be like this. If A is positive, our graph will be like this. To remember this, think of this as a smiley. Think of this as a sad face. So negative is sad, positive is smiley. And then P is how many points our graph is shifted to the left or right. Because if we have a graph, naturally all graphs are like this. And then the equations is in the form f of x is equal to ax squared. So this graph is at the origin. Okay, so if we're going to shift it to the left or right, then we're going to have a p value to our equation. That is to say, our ax squared will become ax plus or minus p, depending on how many units we move it to the left or right. If we move it by 3 units to the right, our function is going to look like this. Ax, remember 3 units to the right, so it's going to be minus 3 squared. Don't forget, to the right is negative, to the left is positive. And if we move it 3 units to left, it's going to look like this. X plus 3 squared. Okay, and our function can be something like this. This is 0, and then originally it was here. Then we want to move it 3 units to the left. Then it's gonna come to this. This is minus 2, minus 1, minus 2, minus 3. It's gonna look like this. It's gonna start here, and I'll erase this so that it's clear. I'll erase this so that you're able to see. I'll erase this. So let's say we're given our Cartesian plane like this. This is 0. Let's say our graph originally it's here, and then they asked us to move it 3 units to the left. Then it's gonna look like, the equation will look like this, but our graph will look like this. This is minus 1, minus 2, minus 3. So it's gonna look like this. We're shifting it 3 units to the left, so it's gonna move from 0 to minus 3. Why is our equation plus if we move to the left, or why is it positive here if we move it to the left? Because if you take what's inside the bracket and say x plus 3 is equal to 0, x value will be minus 3, which will be the point in which will be the x value of your turning point, which will be minus 3, and the y value will be 0 because this graph has not shifted anywhere up or down. Okay, now we looked at shifting to the left or right. Now how about shifting upwards? So if our graph originally is at the origin, it will look like this, like we said. This is y, this is x, where f of x is equal to ax squared. If it's like this, then our graph is still at the origin, that is still at 0 and 0. The turning point is 0 and 0 at this point. This is the point, turning point. But if we want to move it up or down, we want to have it like come to this point or come to this point, depending on whether we want to move it down or up. Now let's focus on moving up. Okay, so if we move it up, our graph will move from this point to the red point. It's moving upwards. So our graph will no longer be at origin, will be at the point that we move it upwards. So moving up, we're going to add to our equation the q element or the q parameter plus q. Plus q is the amount of units we move it upwards. If we move it by 3, we're just going to add plus 3. And the same applies when we're moving downwards. If we move it downwards, our equation is going to be f of x is equal to ax squared minus q. Okay, if we move it downward, it's going to be a minus. All right, now let's come back to the equation that we spoke about here, which is the turning point equation, which is this. So back to our turning point equation. Turning point equation, which is written in the form f of x. Remember, f of x is just a notation. You can have h of x, g of x, m of x, whatever the letter you want. And then a x plus or minus p squared plus or minus q. So this one is a generic equation of a function that is shifted off the origin, or it's still at the origin, because if you replace this p and q with values, the graph will be at the origin. Okay, so don't be confused. Whenever we're given a generic equation like this and you're given the turning point, you're just going to replace your p values depending on whether it's moved left or right, and your q value depending on whether it moved up or down.